Hi, we're here at the Macedonia Cemetery in Johns Creek, Georgia.
Our goal is to raise money to preserve the history of the cemetery for generations to come.
And today we have some guests from the Johns Creek Historical Society to tell us more about what was previously on this land.
I'm Joan Compton. I'm the president and one of the co-founders of the Johns Creek Historical Society. I'm going to give a brief history of the Macedonia Cemetery, and I'm going to start by talking about the land we're standing on right now. This actually was part of the Cherokee territory in the early 1800s, really until 1838 when the Cherokee were pushed out. We were in the Hickory Log District, and the people who lived here in the early 1800s were large farm owners, or some of them were even, you could call them plantation owners. They did have slaves, and so that's part of the story of this cemetery. As far as the history of this land, who owned it originally, as far as we know with the records, when it was Cherokee, it was George Morgan Waters. He did have 100 slaves. We do know that one of his slaves is buried here. After George was pushed out because he was Cherokee, he lost his land. He tried to buy it back, he was not successful. So after George Morgan left, Jackson Graham was the owner. I think the cemetery is important because in Johns Creek we have very little physical tie to our history. Most of the buildings have been torn down, so there are very few structures here. So there's very little where you can travel around Johns Creek and actually feel connected to the history. The cemeteries here is one way that you can, in particular this one, because the history is pretty rich. Aside from the slaves that are buried here, which are only a few compared to all the other people that are buried here, what I'm finding from the genealogy is it looks like most of them are first and second generation descendants from slaves who would have worked this land too. So I think that's important as well.
Hi, my name's Kirk Kennedy, and I am a board member of Johns Creek Historical Society. Well, one of the key elements of converting this cemetery and church grounds into a memorial garden is one of the things, if you look behind me, the large trees that weren't here when these people were originally buried, those have to come out. And then we have to do a ground penetrating radar to find the additional graves. And that's when we talk about clearing the land, we're talking about the pine trees. So once we have the land cleared, do the ground penetrating radar, then we've got to mark all the unmarked graves, and then we come along with the landscaping. While we're doing this, we're also going to be repairing. Some of these headstones are broken, some are buried under debris, and we have to retrieve those and restore them. We want to make sure that this place is held as a kind of a retreat, and we hold a history to this area. And it's a prime piece of land in the middle of Johns Creek. Most of the land in Johns Creek is, gone. And we want to maintain and hold this piece of property so it doesn't get developed and it stays in its natural state.
Please help donate to support and restore this historic cemetery.